Greetings, this is Greg. This video is just a quick addition or supplement to my earlier video on aircraft exhaust systems. So if you haven't watched that video first, this one might not make as much sense as it otherwise would. In my earlier exhaust video, linked in the comments section below, I mentioned that the Spitfire Mark V had exhaust stacks that combined 2 cylinders into one exhaust exit. Thus it had 3 exhaust stacks per side for its Merlin V12. This was a bit unusual, as most World War II V12 powered fighters had 1 exhaust stack per cylinder, including earlier and later versions of the Spitfire. As I mentioned in the earlier video, I feel this was done in an attempt to try and increase exhaust thrust from the engine. Another theory is that it was done to minimize exhaust flame visibility for night flying, but I don't think that's very likely. If it was done to hide the exhaust flames, it certainly didn't work, and Spitfires were not really night fighters anyway. Either way, they abandoned it for subsequent models and went back to individual stacks for each cylinder. As it turns out, there is a NACA report on the Spitfire Mark V exhaust. It doesn't discuss the motivations for the design. NACA was only concerned about improving it, but there are some interesting comments, and I thought it was worth covering in a short video. By the way, I know a few of you don't like me saying NACA and would rather I say the NACA each time, but since I'm the one who has to make this reference thousands of times, I'm going to go with NACA. If it upsets you that much, this just isn't the right channel for you anyway. The Rolls-Royce exhaust stacks were tested and compared with NACA design stacks. The NACA stacks were unusual in that they had 1 stack per exhaust port, not just 1 per cylinder. That is, it used 12 exhaust exits on each side of the plane, 24 in total. This would not even be an option on some engines. They could do it on the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine because it had 1 exhaust port per exhaust valve, as you can see here. The Allison was set up the same way. The DB605 had each pair of exhaust valves sharing a port, and thus only 6 ports per cylinder bank. I'm not saying that's a drawback, I'm just pointing out the difference so you can understand why they were able to go this route on the Merlin. The new NACA exhaust stacks were nearly flush with the fuselage. That alone would induce drag, and the stacks were shaped to optimize exhaust thrust. The result was an increase in airspeed of 6 miles per hour. That's pretty good. For you metric people, it's about 10 kilometers per hour. The summary also points out that they could not quantify the portion of that 6 mile per hour gain that was due to thrust versus reduced drag. Either way, 6 miles an hour is 6 miles an hour. They go on to mention that while the exhaust flame visibility was a bit higher with the NACA stacks, neither one was low enough to be satisfactory in that regard, at least not for the purposes of night fighting. It appears that there was little difference in flame visibility at night between the two designs, so I don't think that Rolls-Royce stacks were designed with night fighting in mind, but maybe. We often forget about the effects of exhaust in the cockpit or the effects of the hot exhaust increasing cockpit temperature. Those were important factors, and NACA made mention of them as well. The conclusion was that NACA stacks gave an extra 6 miles per hour, and that neither type was satisfactory for night fighting, which in the case of the Mark V really didn't matter much anyway. After the Spitfire Mark V, the subsequent models went back to 6 pipes per side. I'm not sure why they didn't go with the NACA design, but there could be a lot of reasons. It may not have been worth the trouble for some logistical issue, or it could be that the later models of the Merlin didn't benefit from the 24 stack configuration. So I hope you folks found this interesting. I know this isn't a big video, but I thought the information was needed to sort of complete my earlier exhaust video. Have a great day, and goodbye for now. Oh, wait, one more thing. Some of you may recall I previously tried to show you Ramstein Air Force Base from the top of the Bismarck Tower in Landstuhl, Germany, and was unsuccessful because they now lock that tower up. I had never encountered that in the past. So, rather than figure out if the tower is going to be unlocked or waste a trip hiking up to the top of that hill again, I will go with another plan. First, let me show you where the Bismarck Tower is, where we went in the last video. It's through the trees at the top of the screen there. You can just barely see it, and I'll move the camera there. It's to the far left of the screen right there. So Hopefully you can see it. If you can't, it's not that important. It's just having it for reference for where we're going. So, new plan is to go to the top of this little mountain to the Burg Nanstein Castle. I know that's going to be available. They're not going to block that off because they sell admission to it. Plus, that's a restaurant out in front, and these people have to make money. So now we're at the castle. We're on the opposite side of what we just viewed because that's the way the trail comes up. And this is the path by which potential hostiles or really anybody visiting the castle would have to go down. I imagine if you were a hostile, it would be extremely daunting to go down this path because you're going to be taking a lot of fire from these walls, and that's earth on the other side of those walls. In other words, it's basically a giant retaining wall. So it would be difficult to break through it. And you're going to approach not a real castle, not knowledgeable about castles, I guess, other than I do visit them. I believe this would be called a gatehouse or a guardhouse, something to that effect. What I find interesting is these holes to the left and right of the arch. They are to allow the defenders to fire at you, but you would have a difficult time firing back at them because the holes are stepped internally in such a way that arrows are going to hit those steps and bounce back, or bullets or whatever. The castle was updated for firearms at some point. It was built around in the early 12th century, actually I think mid-12th century. I had to switch cameras here, sorry about that. Here's the inside of the guard area, so you can see how he could shoot out at you. I'm using my cell phone now because I want to save the zoom capability on the camera with what little battery is left for Ramstein, because we're pretty far away. This is the other side of the castle, and this is the side of the castle on which you'll find the main entrance. The restaurant to the left is not part of the original construction. The castle has an interesting history, and you can look it up, Burg Nanstein. You can read about it online. It's been in an interesting siege, and it's had a pretty good story because it's just so old, so much has happened. And it's reasonably well preserved internally by medieval castle ruin standards, I guess, at least compared to what you see in Germany. I mean, it's certainly not, I wouldn't call it well preserved, but all the rooms and staircases and things are either intact or you can kind of tell where they were. Anyhow, let's walk over to the edge of the cliff, so to speak, here, and we'll switch cameras and we'll try and zoom in. Off to the left there, you can see that notch in the trees. That, again, is where the Bismarck Tower was. And then off in the distance is, I switched cameras as you can see, off in the distance is Ramstein. And again, there's the notch where the Bismarck Tower was. Much better view from there, but c'est la vie. We'll zoom in here, and that's it. Ramstein Air Base. Huge construction project after World War II in Europe. I talk about it a bit in the other video. It's really impressive how much work they did. They basically turned a swamp into an airport. That's ABX Air. That used to be Airborne Express, a competitor to DHL or Federal Express. They got bought out by, well, it's a whole long story. It actually involves Germany. It's kind of a train wreck. There's a C-17. Those things, any Air Force base you go to, it seems that there are C-17s there. That thing is the workhorse of the Air Force. Well, that's it. The camera's out of battery, but at least I was able to successfully show you Ramstein Air Force Base. Would have liked to have seen it from the Bismarck Tower, but that just didn't work out. I think I'll stay up here and have a drink and lunch as soon as this cafe opens up and enjoy the view. I hope all of you are having a great day. Thanks and goodbye.